I just like the idea of integrating work with fitness. I don't think the two have to be separated or compartmentalized. I've been doing, meetings on the run for for as long as I can remember. I mean, in my early days with the North Face, I scheduled all of our meetings. We were jogging. We had a scribe, and we'd go on a 1 hour run, and we'd basically just talk about business. And motion stirs emotion. We had some of our best ideas while we were out running together.
Welcome to Ultrahabits. Here, we go under the hood with our guests to unpack the minutiae and to understand what processes and systems they engage or research that result in ultra-enhanced living.
Howdy, folks. It's RJ Singh here from Ultrahabits, and we are now back at you with season 2 of this show. Now, some interesting developments for myself and the family. We decided to move down to Victoria. We're currently at the border in a caravan park. The furniture made it through. We're still waiting on our passes. However, the good news is we're at a beautiful caravan park. The kids are having a great time. We're safe, secure, and warm, and the show continues. So we have our first guest, the ultra running extraordinaire, Dean Karnazes. Now, we actually recorded this video whilst he's in quarantine here in Australia. He is participating in a charity run with Pat Farmer, 1,000 Miles to Light. They're running from Broken Hill to Byron Bay, and we had the pleasure of interviewing him while he was on quarantine. Now, anyone that knows Dean knows it's probably easier for him to run 1,000 miles than to sit still for 2 weeks, which is quite impressive if you know the man. So most people that interview Dean, and Dean is probably the most interviewed ultra runner of all time, talk about running. Now, of course, we talk about running as an ultra runner, and many people in our community are in endurance sports. Of course, we're going to talk about it, but a lot of people don't realize that Dean is an MBA, went to a top business school, and was a senior marketer for many, many years. And we talk about not only running, but we talk about business and how he has had to pivot his approach. Obviously, running at a community and group level where he traditionally focuses energies has gone down, but at an individual level, running has inclined. So he's been really aligning with initiatives and products focused on the end runner, and he's had to pivot his whole approach and business model. And we have a really interesting discussion about that. So it's a conversation that focuses on that cross-section of running, business. We talk about family, what it's like when you make your living from having to move all the time, and how he's been able to manage that whilst raising a family and children. It's a really, really great conversation. It's someone that I personally wanted to talk to for many, many years. Dean's had a major influence on my own ultra running journey. And I do hope that whether you're into ultra running, you're into business, or both, you get a lot out of this conversation. So this season, we've taken all your feedback on board. We hope that you enjoy the show. Thanks for continuing to support us. Obviously, we want your feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly. Let us know what we can improve, what you love, what you don't. Anyways, we're going to leave you with Dean now. Take care, peace. Y'all have a great one. Dean, we want to welcome you to the Ultrahabits show. Although it hasn't been a smooth process, we finally made it, and we're finally here. And welcome to Australia, Dean.
It's good to be back. I lived here when I was in high school, actually an exchange student on the northern beaches of Sydney, and I've traveled to Australia many times, but it's nice to be back. I wish under better circumstances.
I remember you were out here, I think in 2018, I read a piece where you ran an ultra in Blackall, right? In the Sunshine Coast, is that right?
Yeah, I did the Blackall 100 on the Sunshine Coast. And that was one of the last ultras I did before the pandemic.
So when you were living here as a student, were you running in the bush or were you running on the road? What's your view on Australian running?
When I was here as a student, I was surfing more than running. So I was supposed to go to high school, but it was optional. If the surf was good, school was optional. Yeah. So I wasn't doing a lot running, but in my subsequent trips back, I've done quite a bit of running. So I've run the the Blue Mountain 100 and the Blackall 100. I once ran from the summit of Mount Kosciuszko to Sydney. So I ran 600 kilometers in 6 days in something that was called the Summit to Sydney. So I've done a lot of running in Australia. And, you know, the one thing about the Australian ultra running community, I think it's very cohesive. And I think there's a lot of camaraderie, at least, you know, from the Blackall 100, they put on a show. You know, there's wars between the aid stations for the best food at the aid stations, and they have a lot of fun with it. So it's, you know, that was a very spirited event, and I really found it quite endearing.
Have you ever run an ultra in New Zealand, Dean?
No, I haven't. I've traveled to New Zealand a couple times. And the first time I went is when I was living in Australia, and I spent 2 weeks hitchhiking around New Zealand, just with my surfboard and a backpack, but no running. But I, you know, those memories would tell me that the running in New Zealand's amazing. And of course, I know a lot about the running in New Zealand, and it is amazing.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting because you were just talking about your experience here in Australia. And Australians, we, as an American living here, I now consider myself both, but we have a serious kind of a bit of dry humor in Australia. And I remember when I was running an ultra, I think a year and a half ago, right before the pandemic in New Zealand, because the Kiwis obviously have a large Pacific Islander population. Between aid stations, when you hit an aid station, they've got like the hip hop music, they're dancing, and like it's just, you know, when you're in the pain cave and you're just in the absolute pits of despair, and you get to an aid station to see people dancing and laughing, it was just something that I had never experienced before. So it just made me think when you were talking about the kind of experience at the aid stations. Yeah,
it was the same sort of thing. I mean, people were in Hawaiian shirts. It was very festive.
Yeah,
right. It was a suffer fest. It was hot and humid, and it was raining, and it got very slippery, and just to come into an aid station and have people, you know, music blaring, and, you know, Hawaiian music blaring, and all this food, it was quite uplifting.
Yeah, I actually tried to make it down to Sydney because I think you were doing some signings actually in the city, but I had some business there, and I think you had already left. And so unfortunately I missed you, but you are back and you're stuck in a hotel in quarantine. So what does life look like for the man that cannot stop moving 2 weeks in quarantine? What are you doing in terms of exercise, Dean? Because I know you're exercising. What are you doing?
Well, one thing I've learned a lot of like hacks when you're living in a hotel just from traveling so much. So the first thing I did is I pulled out the ironing board, and that's my standing desk. So I'm not, even right now, I'm pacing up and down the hallway of the hotel as we're talking. I'm not sitting down at all. And then I've got my HIIT routine, which is primarily body weight, you know, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. I brought my TRX straps. I'm doing a lot of burpees, a lot of jumping lunges. I had some weights delivered to my room, and I'm getting a treadmill later today. So I'm trying to stay active, and just constantly moving from the second I get up.
Dean, that's a really good point. And something I actually want to unpack, because I'm in the corporate land, and I'm in and around lots of people that view my day is unusual because people see what I do. I take naps, I run, I do things that help me manage my energy. And I think people don't realize that you can integrate exercise into your work. And that was something that you highlighted in one of your books that I actually read, that it was an interview with Rich Roll. I think while you work, you kind of go into the other room and do pull-ups, and you go back into work. So you can actually integrate exercise into I think people think of this kind of two separate events, right? Where I'm going to sweat too much, or I have to separate or isolate my exercise from my workday. What's your view on that?
I think that's becoming much more accepted. You know, I've been doing that for about a decade. And, you know, I remember even when I was going to an office, I had a pull-up bar in my office and a sit-up mat. And I was constantly cycling through like a hit routine. It's about a 12 to 14-minute hit routine throughout the course of the day. And I just like the idea of integrating work with fitness. I don't think the two have to be separated or compartmentalized. I've been doing, meetings on the run for as long as I can remember. I mean, in my early days with the North Face, I scheduled all of our meetings. We were jogging. We had a scribe, and we'd go on a 1-hour run, and we'd basically just talk about business. And motion stirs emotion. We had some of our best ideas while we were out running together.
People may not realize that you actually had a corporate background. Can you dive more into that and how the running evolution occurred?
Yeah, people don't know, but I have an MBA. So yeah, I keep that fact hidden. And there's a lot of lessons from running that translate to business. But the other thing that you don't hear a lot of is there's a lot of lessons from business that translate to running. And when I started getting into ultra running, I thought, this is something you love. It'd be wonderful to make a career doing this, but how? I mean, you win an ultra marathon, you get a belt buckle. And I thought that's not going to, put food on the table. So I used a lot of, the skills I've learned in marketing and management. And in that way, was able to carve out a living, as an ultra marathoner when I first started doing this, almost 3 decades ago. That was unheard of.
Well, that's actually an interesting point, because we now live in an era where lots of young workers are trying to pivot into their dream. You did that years ago. What did that process actually look like? I mean, in terms of, I know it wasn't linear, but how did you unpeel yourself from corporate living and corporate lifestyle and work to ultimately living and working what you love?
Yeah, well, I thought, you need to pay the bills. So let's be a realist here. You can't just go do what you love if you're going to be broke. So I thought, how are you going to make a living, as an ultramarathoner? And I thought, well, let's look at some sources of revenue. And I thought, you can work with sponsors. So, you can work with sponsors to, develop new products to bring to market, to expand into new markets and so forth. And I thought you can maybe write a book and see how that goes. And so I wrote a book, and that became a bestseller, which amazed me actually. But all of a sudden I had kind of a revenue stream coming in from royalties. And then I thought, you can do some keynote speaking. You're a business guy, and corporations are always looking for motivational speakers. So I started doing a lot of keynote speaking and just kind of piecing all of that together. The other thing that I tried to do is to build the sport of ultramarathoning. I mean, when I first started ultramarathoning, the first year I ran an ultramarathon was 1993. And in North America, there were about 3,500 finishers of an ultramarathon. In 2018, there were about 135,000 finishers. So the sport itself has grown. And I thought that, the more the sport grows, the more their opportunity would be for making a living, doing what you love.
Was there a overlap where you rubbed up against your corporate job where people were wondering about Dean's focus? And the second part of that question is, and this is probably more selfishly, I find when I'm training for ultra, and it could be because I have little kids, but it just managing my workload and the corporate commitments, I'm wrecked by 10:30 a.m. and that's kind of why I've had to integrate sleeping and all that. How did you manage, I suppose, the balance of the corporate agenda, the expectations, and your performance and energy levels?
I was a younger man then, and when I reflect back on how I pulled it off, I don't know how I did it, because I wasn't sleeping at all.
Right.
And I was getting up at 3 a.m. to train, and then having breakfast with the kids. Like, I had young kids as well, And, being a good father was my number one priority. So I'd have breakfast with the kids after running a marathon before breakfast. And then I'd get them to school. I'd shower up and shave, go to the office, do the things that a lot of, triathletes and marathoners know. At lunch, I'd slip out of the office, go for my 1 hour run, kind of do a quick sponge bath in the sink in the bathroom and go back to the office. And so it was just a lot of sleep deprivation. But somehow, when you're impassioned and when you're energized by what you're doing, it doesn't seem like work.
Yeah, that's true. So now you've written this enigma, right? Like you're a man that literally can't sit still. And people have said this to me as well. But you've had enough follow through and presence to complete an MBA. You've now written, I think, is this your fourth book or third or fourth?
Runner's High is my fifth book, actually.
Your fifth book. Runner's High. Can you go into what Runner's High is about? Because I actually, I haven't had the opportunity to read it yet because it's so new. It's effectively not out on Audible, where I consume most of my my content, but it is out in hard copy. And I've read the reviews, and some of the reviews say it's a much more introspective piece. So what was the intent behind writing this one?
Well, my first book that I spoke of, which is titled Ultramarathon Man, was a coming of age book. So it was kind of learning about this crazy world of ultramarathoning where people run, hundreds of kilometers without stopping. And so 5 books later, I thought, now it's time to reflect on, how's the ride been, those 2.5 decades that you've been doing this. How are you still doing it? How has the sport changed? How have you changed? And what has running brought to your life? Let's face it, running it's not a real intellectual pursuit, is it? It's a very simple action, but it's profound, and running becomes your identity in a way. I think you can relate to this intimately. It's who you are. And so I thought, tell a story that is both propulsive, that, is kind of a page turner, but do that by, tugging on people's heartstrings, make it intimate, make it personal, and, be real. And that's what a Runner's High is all about. It's hard to explain the book. There's a lot of nuance to the book, but I'll tell you what, even today, before this interview, I got a message from a guy that said he was going to read a couple chapters of the book last night before bed. And he said 5 hours later, he finished the last page. And then he said he got up and he said, I just had to go for a run. So something about the book has worked.
Charlie, your relationship with running is interesting. And every runner, I suppose, has a unique relationship to running. Charlie says he doesn't necessarily even like to run always. He just likes effectively the runner's high. Are you always, because someone coming across you, Dean, would feel, and possibly naively, that you would just always would love to run at any given opportunity. Is this true, or do you struggle with your runs as well? Is there the ups and downs that we all can go through in terms of our motivation? What's your relationship to running, and what is it about running that is your most favorite thing?
Well, I laugh when you reference Charlie, because Charlie always tells me he doesn't like the run. He likes the after run.
That's he's such a typical addict.
Yeah. Just get me that high. Yeah. But, I actually like running itself, just for nothing else than running. I tend to view running as play. And I also tend to view running as adventure. Not every workout to me is quantified. We live in such a quantified world, and so many runners, are so plugged into every single run, and every run has got to be about something. To me, some runs are just about the joy of running itself. And, thankfully, the place I live, which is just north of San Francisco, a place called Marin County, there are endless trails that I can just wander on right at my door. So, some days I'm running a set route if, on a specified time, or I'm trying to follow a training block. Other days I'm not even wearing a watch, a sports tracker. I'm just going for a run just to enjoy it, just to be out in nature. And maybe I'm gone for an hour, maybe I'm gone for 5 hours. I just run by feel. And to me, that keeps it fresh. And I love running as much now as I ever did. But to your question, are some days more difficult than others? Yeah, without a doubt. But in a lot of ways, after you get back from those runs where you don't want to run, the reward is even greater.
So you're talking about that kind of ability to transcend how we feel and know that we did what we needed to do, or we did the right thing in the face of not wanting to or not feeling like it, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that we a lot of times know what we should do, what is the right thing to do, but that's often the hard thing to do, isn't it? So when you do the hard thing, it's that much more rewarding when you complete it.
Yeah. I've at times found myself at the other end of the spectrum where I need to learn, or have had to learn, how to become skillful and not necessarily keep hitting my head against that wall because that's the task. And starting to kind of think, okay, well, how can I be skillful with my energy, where I'm at, different circumstances throughout the day. But it's been such an evolution for me. And we were talking earlier about I'm also from the San Francisco Bay Area. The thought isn't lost upon me that, or how ironic it is that it took me to come to Australia to find ultra running, only to learn that it's so kind of prolific in the Bay Area. I had the opportunity a couple years ago to run in Auburn. I didn't run Western States. I think I ran part of it, but it really, it was amazing to realize just how much good running is back home.
Yeah, I mean, California, and specifically Marin County, in a lot of ways is ground zero for ultra running. And Auburn, the city you reference, they're now known as the endurance capital of the world. Their mayor proclaimed that. So, and Auburn is the finish of Western States, as you know.
Hey guys, just wanted to take a quick break to thank you for your continued support. If you are new to the show and haven't done so, please go to the website at www.ultrahabits.co to subscribe. You can also rate our podcast. You can do that on any of your favorite mediums that you listen to podcasts. We're also on YouTube. And again, you can go to the website to do so. It is on the back of your support that we've been able to grow so strong in season 1. And we hope that we can continue to serve you with great conversations, information, and game-changing habits. Anyways, man, I'm out of here. Peace out. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show. So let's talk about your personal stuff a little bit more and some of the lessons learned. I think you're in a unique position because a lot of ultra runners of today, the younger generation, that's all they've been doing, right? The guys like yourself and Charlie, you guys that were kind of the OGs in the game, you guys had jobs, right? Like you guys were working and you guys were building families. And I think a lot of the lessons that you bring across are super relevant to the corporate arena and that executive athlete that we really focus on here at Ultrahabits. So what were some of those learnings that you had the other way in terms of applicability of lessons from business into running, and even running it back into business, that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultra running teaches you there are no shortcuts. There's no path of least resistance. You can't fake your way to the finish of an ultra marathon. You've got to pay your dues. So, that lesson in business, I think, is invaluable. It's not easy. And taking the easy path is not going to get you to your goals. So having that work ethic and that discipline to pay your dues, to put in the necessary work, I think is essential. The other thing to me with ultra marathoning is getting comfortable with uncertainty, because there's, when you're standing at the start of a 100-mile foot race, there's absolutely no guarantee you're going to get to the finish line. So much about finishing an ultramarathon is about problem solving, dealing with things that arise along the way. And so it teaches you to be spontaneous. It teaches you to be good at improvising, and it teaches you to be good at, knowing when just to put your head down and grunt through it, versus when to back off and to, take more seriously the hurdles you're facing.
That's really, really profound. I mean, just not to digress, it's connected to the question. Have you ever done, you don't seem like someone that would like it. It's not necessarily my thing, but have you gotten into obstacle course racing? And
yeah, I'm pretty good friends with the founder of Spartan Race, Joe DeSena. He's an amazing businessman, by the way. So I've done a number of his races, the Spartan races, which are, OCRs, obstacle course races. I tend to do the longer ones, which are the Beast or the Ultra Beast, but I quite enjoy it. I quite enjoy mixing it up. I mean, it's very much a different challenge than just running itself, but I like trying new things.
Yeah, Joe was our first guest when we kicked off Ultrahabits, and I actually knew him before this show. And the thing I like about Joe is I kind of, I seek advice, and he's super accessible on email, and he's always really quick to get back. And he was our first guest. And one of the things he said to me was that, it's always the people that you don't suspect that do well in his events, the CEOs, the moms, and, you get a lot of elite ex-military people that don't necessarily finish it. And I remember having a conversation with my CEO. I said to him, I said, dude, you would be super, super good in an ultra or obstacle racing. And he kind of doubted himself. But what he doesn't realize, the reason I said that is I've just watched his ability to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty and really kick off and have the sustainable energy and attitude towards this transformation within our business we had within my logistics business. So I think you're quite right that a lot of the inner workings required to do an ultra are super applicable in commerce, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the basic nuts and bolts of being a good business guy are the same.
And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you and talk to you about, and given I didn't have the benefit of reading your book, is I know that family's always been super important to you. And I remember telling my wife how, because I was trying to couch the justification for what I do by using you. I was like, yeah, this better Dean, they go on family holidays, and sometimes his wife will drive ahead and he'll run and meet him. And she was kind of looking at me like, yeah, all right, okay, I see where you're going with this. But how just reflecting upon your pursuit and this unwavering drive within ultramarathoning, which is an all-consuming thing, really, mind, body, soul, spirit. How have you maintained the proper focus and energy levels within the family? Like, has that been a continual struggle, something you've had to reflect on continuously? Like, how do you audit that?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly, there's been very little friction from my running. And I think a couple things that I've always put my family first. And I think that, kids are really quick to see through hypocrisy. So if you tell them they're your number one priority, but they see you out running all the time and ignoring them, they notice that. But it was coming from a place of authenticity, my love for my kids and my family. So I've always put them first. The other thing is that I've taken them everywhere. I mean, they've traveled the world with me. They've been to Australia, they've been to Europe multiple times, South America. So I take them with me. Once when I ran 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days, they came along. And how many kids their age, my son was 9 and my daughter was 11, have seen all 50 states. So they got to see all 50 states. They got to meet other kids, along the way. They got to try the food in different states. So it's been a kind of a really nice life for them in that regard. The other thing that I've done is, when we travel, it's not just about dad going to a race. That's one of the elements, but I do a lot of other things for them. We do a lot of sightseeing. We do a lot of fun kids things. So when I say, hey, you want to go to this next race, instead of them saying, oh, dad's going to drag us to another race again, the whole family looks forward to it because, we have a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of triathletes, we've had a few of them on the show saying, you really make it a family event. I do as well. I do let my wife know, coming up to a taper, she knows like, the mileage may increase and I may get a bit cranky on those weekend runs after the run when I come home and, 3-year-olds pulling me from pillar to post. But I think you're quite right. I think having that balance, inclusivity is important, making it something that's really fun and about the family, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Otherwise they dread it. But, it's one time I'll splurge on a nice hotel room, I'll make it really nice for them. And that pays big dividends.
So what's life going to look like for Dean in the next 5 to 10 years? Like what are you're, admittedly your age is catching up with you. It's not necessarily as easy for you to run the distances that you used to and the speeds that you used to, but you still are. You're still out there doing your thing. But how do you see things playing out for you in terms of your interests and your focus within the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, I'll preface that by saying that, COVID has changed everything. And it's forced me to very quickly kind of course correct and look at the 5-year plan because, my bread and butter was going to events. I mean, I was on the road almost every weekend. I was at a running event, doing a book signing or, a poster signing in a sponsor's booth, an appearance or giving a keynote talk. And, with COVID, big events just stopped. I mean, literally just stopped. So all of a sudden this, my income stream was cut, I don't know, by 3/4, literally overnight. And I thought, okay, you're gonna have to figure out what do you do given the new landscape and not knowing when things will be fully back online. So, the one thing that I've started to do is I've started to invest and I've started to trust my instinct more. You wouldn't imagine the things that show up on my doorstep. I don't even know how people find out where I live, but I get all kinds of crazy devices.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
supplements and, new products. Some of it is crap. Others is, some of it is really intriguing and promising. So I've started, taking a share in companies I work with.
Right.
And also, giving them free kind of consulting services. And that's something I'm going to continue to do because I think, one, I find it very intriguing and rewarding, the work itself. But two, it's another way to, prepare for my financial future. So I've been doing a whole lot of that during the pandemic.
That's super interesting because whilst running as a group or event may decline, the act of running will actually incline. So it's about, well, how do you then pivot your positioning to be more geared towards the individual runner versus events, right? Because you're still super relevant as a thought leader and running brand ambassador. So whilst you may not be event driven, you'll be still aligning with businesses or products that are runner focused, right?
You got it. Yep, that's exactly the same thinking I have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I've got a friend here in Australia who has started working. He's a director at Peloton. Now, I'm not a cyclist, but like businesses like that are going to explode, right? From my understanding, they cycle and they get these kind of virtual video. And, like I knew a guy here in Australia that his business was declining with treadmills because of gyms. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like he's in the right business,
Oh,
So,
this has been it's been such a divisive event, COVID, for businesses. I mean, it's businesses have either sunk or just risen stratospherically. And, your perception is absolutely right. The number of people running, at least in the US, and I think in Australia as well, has it's exploded since the pandemic. More and more people have taken to running because it's accessible. It's not in a gym. It's cheap, right? I mean, you don't need to spend a lot of equipment. So more and more people are running, and that's been a huge boom for sportswear manufacturers, footwear manufacturers, exercise equipment manufacturers, where things like gyms, yoga studios, it's been horrible for them. And as well, unfortunately for events, big events like the New York City Marathon, the Boston Marathon, I mean, they've just been, completely decimated. And I can't see, like the New York City Marathon, for instance. I mean, there's in the weekend of the Marathon Expo, there's something like 300,000 people go through the Javits Center. You're not going to have 300,000 people, congregating in a convention center anytime in the near future. So that business is gone for a while, if not for a long time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's about, how do you reach the individual now? And I think you're in a very good position if you align with the right innovative brands to be a brand ambassador and give these young companies also the insights, as well as the Dean K sticks his name to something, it works and it's good. So I think there'll be an opportunity there. And I think it helps that you're a bloody MBA. So there you go. See, well, it was worth it.
I mean, I mean, the pandemic has been, crying on your shoulder about how all the events are gone and how my income got just, cut in half. But that being said, more people are reading more books because, you've got a captive audience now. So, my brand is expanding in ways that it probably wouldn't given the pandemic, and as well as, I mean, I hate to look at it in a competitive view, but those people that are moving up in ultramarathoning, it's harder for them now because there's not as much focus on race winners because there's fewer races. So how do you build your brand if you're a young gun and you can't win races? Where the books are still there and people are still seeing my name about. So it's actually worked out well for me in that regard.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Well, unfortunately, I was talking to Charlie, and I know that you guys were coming, and the plan, probably unbeknownst to you, was that I was going to meet and interview you guys in Byron Bay. My wife's from Byron Bay, and we're going to just drive up there. And I've actually got Pat on the show on 2 days from now. So that'll be interesting. But again, I think what we'll do is, before we start to wrap it up, Dean, I know there's some things that our audience want to know in terms of implementable things they can do. Say you've got a corporate person that is in the office, he or she's looking to start to get into marathons, into running. What are some of the things that you would advise people looking to get into running in terms of habits, things they could do to start to solidify running?
I think they should start by buying my book.
Great call.
Buy my book, and then but I think people should look inside. I'm 100% Greek, and the Oracle of Delphi always said, know thyself. And so I think that if you are an introvert, as I am, you probably are going to prefer running by yourself. So I would say, start from the ground up, invest in a good pair of footwear. Footwear technology has come so far in the past 3 to 5 years that, it's just with Hoka's and all these other innovations, running is much more comfortable than it used to be. So invest in a good pair of footwear, and then, go online and look for a training plan. There's a wonderful program called Couch to 5K that will get you off the couch and finishing a 5K. And I think 6 weeks time. So, look at something like that. If you're an extrovert, then sign up to be part of a group. I mean, I know it's harder these days to run as a group, but there still are group runs taking place. You know, they're small, they're typically less than 10 people. But if you like that accountability of, you know, I've got to be, you know, at Pitt Street at 9 a.m. on Wednesdays and Saturdays, then join a running group. So that's what I recommend.
Before we go, I got to get geek for a minute. I know you're super Greek, like most Greeks are super Greek. And we obviously had a great Greek runner, Yiannis Kouros, out of Australia, who I'm sure you know. Now he, in Adelaide, and I think in 1996, ran 306 kilometers in 24 hours before, you know, a lot of the technology. And there's a lot of folklore around his running, because I think he said he never trained more than 20 Ks, but, you know. And I know Kilian Jordet recently tried to break his 24-hour record, and he didn't. How do you think this man ran so fast for so long before all the technology? And don't tell me because you think he's Greek.
It's funny though, you know, his family and my father's family are from the same village.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yiannis Kouros is, I don't know why the scientific world have not like dissected him, and I mean he's otherworldly. And how he did it, it's crazy how he did the things he did, and he attributes it to, he's always so random, like, oh, I don't know how to train. He says, oh, it's because I eat baklava, you know, which is sweet Greek pastry. I'm like, dude, give me a break. I mean, your records have stood for, well, you know, I mean, 25 years, and no one's even come close. I mean, the best ultra runners in the world these days are not even coming close to his records. You know, he won a race called the Spartathlon, which is it's a 246 kilometer race in Greece, and they thought he cheated because his time was, he was 12 hours ahead of the next guy, and they thought he got in a car. And so he said, well, you can just follow me next time. He went out next year and broke his previous record, and they followed him the whole way, and people couldn't believe it. So he's a phenomenal specimen, and how he was able to do what he did, it still boggles my mind.
So you think it was phenomenal? Like it wasn't, it was just freak kind of just, it was arbitrary. You don't think there was any kind of science behind his approach necessarily?
No, I mean, I think there's maybe genetics involved. I mean, when you go to the area, you know, like where he's from and where my father's family's from, people there are just, I mean, their body type is different. I mean, even people that are not in shape, they look like goats, you know, and they do spend a lot of time outdoors, and it is very mountainous. But I think that he just had the right set of genes, and I think he didn't know, you know, what was impossible, and so he went and did it.
No, look, I could dive into this piece with you really, really deep right now, but I won't. Maybe we'll reserve it for another show. That'll be the segue to the follow-up. But what I would like to do is really firstly appreciate you coming on the show, Dean. You've been you know, I've always loved your stuff. You've been an inspiration for me. First of all, maybe give some insights into the new book. I'll leave that to you, and where our audience can find you in terms of more information.
Yeah, I mean, the new book is storytelling. You know, at the heart of what I do is storytelling. And I think at the heart of any good business, it's all about storytelling. So, you know, I've learned how to keep someone engaged with my storytelling. So if you pick up a copy of A Runner's High, I think that read the first page. If I don't have you hooked on the first page, I failed. And I think I might just succeed. So give it a try. And, you know, where do people find me? Someone said, if you Google Dean, I'm the first person that comes up. So if you want to, you know, go to my website, or you want to find me on social media, just Google Dean.
All right, Dean, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. And I really hope you enjoy Australia.
I hope I can get out of this hotel and enjoy Australia as well.
All right, man. Thank you.